Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the very first Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1927 and 1928. Frank Borzage released a romantic drama rooted in realism called Seventh Heaven. The film starred Janet Gaynor and Charles Farrell and went on to earn the most Oscar nominations of any film that year, with 5. It would ultimately win Best Director, Best Actress, and Best Adaptation, but it was the more grand production Wings that earned the honor of being named the first Best Picture winner in the end. So, why did Seventh Heaven come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to Seventh Heaven. Welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and we are here. It has been 3 years. I am now talking about the first ever Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1927 and 1928. We're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of this particular celebration. So I cannot believe I'm here. I'll save some more sentiments towards the end of the show, but we should just jump right in. We are talking about a unique year at the Oscars because the Best Picture race was basically split up into Outstanding Production and Best Unique or Artistic Picture. And that is the first and only time that has happened. But as Academy rules have sort of gone in retrospect, we are just going to be really focusing on the runner-up of the Best Picture race instead of Outstanding Artistic Unique Picture. But we will still be talking about those movies later, just to honor them because they seem to get short shrift in Oscar records. So let's just get right to my guest. You have heard him talking with me about Brokeback Mountain and the films of 2005, Fargo and the films of 1996, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and the films of 1969, and also a bonus episode of On Second Thought about The Crying Game. Please welcome, from AwardsWatch, the one and only Erik Anderson.
Oh my god, is this really my 5th time?
You are in the 5-timers club. Congrats.
I'm a 5-timer.
I'll be shipping over your jacket.
Okay,
soon.
Perfect.
Yes.
I am so absolutely honored to be on this episode. This project of yours has been something that I know myself and for many, many people has absolutely lifted them and entertained them. So I'm emotional. I know you must be, but I am. I just think this is one of, and I've said this to you before, this is one of the best podcasts, best concepts, best things going for all of us crazy people who are so hyper obsessed with the Oscars, and we're always like, oh my god, what would second place be, and where are the vote totals, and all of these things that we always talk about. So I think what you have given Oscar fans is so immeasurable, and I'm honored to be here.
Wow. Look at you, Erik. Already going to start making me cry. It's only been 3 minutes.
I know.
Yes, we'll save some of that for later. I mean, I'm just excited to have someone on who was at the very first Academy Awards and can really speak to what it was like, on the ground, bumping elbows with Janet Gaynor. What it was really like.
Let me tell you about Janet Gaynor.
Oh, you have some things to say.
She stole the last bacon-wrapped scallop, and I have never forgiven her for it. Ever.
She would. Ugh.
She's terrible.
Oh, we'll get to her. We will get to her. Okay, wow. So let's just jump right in here, as we always do. So, the runner up that we are talking about today is Seventh Heaven, not to be confused with the television show. They have no association, as far as I know. But it is probably the runner up to Wings, and let's just jump right in. So, Seventh Heaven is a silent film. It is a romantic drama about a man named Chico who works in the sewers and then gets a promotion to clean the streets. And that is where he meets Diane, who is a prostitute, I believe is implied, but not overtly said. And she has just gotten into a fight with her sister, and Chico ultimately prevents Diane from being arrested by pretending to be her husband. So she ends up moving in with him to just keep up appearances, and naturally, as these things go, they start to form a real bond and end up falling in love, and then things become more complicated with the arrival of the war, which just splits them up, and she waits for him to come home. So the film was directed by Frank Borzage and written by Benjamin Glazer. It's based on the play of the same name by Austin Strong, and it stars Janet Gaynor as Diane, Charles Farrell as Chico, Ben Bard, Gladys Brockwell, and a whole bunch of other supporting performers. And Seventh Heaven was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, the most of any film that year, and it won 3 of those 5, but not Best Picture. All right, Eric, I don't know if you've seen Seventh Heaven before this little endeavor here, but what are your thoughts on this movie?
So I did rewatches of the 3 major films, and I had honestly not seen them for probably 20 or 25 years.
Wow. Okay.
Well, these are like, here's what you watch in film school,
That's
when you
true.
really are at the beginning of any of it. And like I said, I took notes on everything, and then I couldn't find my Seventh Heaven notes, which is really stressful. But I liked it. I liked it fine, I guess. I do think that's really fantastic. Janet Gaynor shade aside, that she factors so heavily into these top 3 films, and I really enjoyed her range. It is funny that there is that implication that she's a prostitute, but it's not. It's really only because her and her sister are unmarried and unattached, and it's like if you were unmarried in the 1920s, you were a whore, and so there's really not a whole lot of middle ground there. But I liked her. It's such a strange film because there's such a lightheartedness about Chico's job as a sewer dweller, and it's actually kind of gross at the beginning because like they fall in the water and there's like really gross. I mean, you just only have to imagine what's going on there. But it is a little bit lighthearted and kind of goofy until you get to the heart of the story of Diane being thrown out and him kind of saving her. And there's a lot of, I mean, obviously it's 1927. There's a lot of just, having to save the girl kind of stories going on here. But it's good. I wish that we had a better restored version of it to watch now. I mean, I was thankful for the YouTube link that you sent me because I hadn't really looked for it yet. But it's a rough print compared to like the Wings restoration, which is phenomenal.
Beautiful. Immaculate, I know.
Yeah, it was startling. So that was a little difficult, but it wasn't enough to overcome. I really loved Gladys Brockwell. She's absolutely the best part of the movie, other than how absolutely fucking gorgeous Charles Farrell is. And we can get into how insanely hot the leads of these movies are. there?
Mm-hmm.
My goodness.
Oh yeah.
I like literally took pictures of my TV for, research purposes. But
Sure.
yes, Gladys Brockwell, I was just she's the kind of like if we were watching a movie now, she would be like all of the gays' favorite that would just be like, yes, bitch, whip that stupid sister. Yes. So
Yes. It's like that Twitter thing that goes around sometimes that's like girl does some sociopathic shit and then her gays are like, okay, work.
work, bitch. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Pretty much. That's the case in a few of these. It's also kind of with Sunrise. There's a situation like that. All right. So with Seventh Heaven, it seems like there's a theme with this guy, Frank Borzage. I've covered 2 other films as the runners-up of those years, which were Bad Girl and A Farewell to Arms. And now with this, we once again are centering on a man and a woman, and they get into a relationship, which is very turbulent. Maybe they're working class or lower class. Usually there's like a backdrop of war. And I think even if there's not a whole lot special about the films, there's kind of like an air of respectability with the craft and just this combination of elements that I think plays really well with the Academy, which is still kind of true in like different forms today, this type of dynamic. But so having said that, this is actually my favorite of those films that I just listed there, and a lot of that has to do with the stars. Actually, I do think Janet Gaynor brings out some empathy here just with her face. I mean, it's just such a classic kind of silent film era face that I think is able to be both vulnerable and strong at the same time. And Charles Farrell has a kind of like roguish charm to him, and I think they work really well together because they both just seem like they're cut from the same cloth, I guess. They are lower class and they're kind of used to life being that way, but they're still able to have these little moments of kind of joy. And actually thematically it's interesting to watch this now because a few weeks ago I talked about Parasite. And there is a motif here of stairs and walking up the stairs, just like in Parasite, and how that sort of symbolizes a certain class divide and how just like the act of walking up the stairs is so simple and yet it just represents so many more opportunities for people. So I responded to that.
Yeah, well, there's even the added metaphor of the fact that he's in the sewer is an entirely another level of being under everybody else.
Exactly.
And his whole dream is like the Little Mermaid, and he just wants to be up where the people are walking.
Yeah. Even
That's
if
his
it just
whole
means
thing.
he's washing the streets. He just wants to be a street cleaner. Yeah.
Exactly. I know. I love his like, golly gee, I just want to be a street cleaner. It's like, that is adorable.
Yeah. But then also it's just like, his apartment is way up on the upper floor, and so you have to walk all the way up, and it's like that big scene for her where she's like full of opportunity and just like, wow.
They found love in a hopeless place.
I guess so. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Gaynor won Best Actress from 3 movies, and I wouldn't mind if they like brought that kind of thing back. So it just was, she had this and Street Angel and Sunrise. So she has the range, as we love to say.
Yes.
And it's undeniable. And you're right. She has a face that's round and just slightly dimpled. And it's probably the most classic silent film face that there is.
This is about people who are in a pretty tough position in life just because of the way society is structured, and it's not like they're doing some big extraordinary thing or they have these brilliant minds or whatever. They basically just want to have value and they just want to find love, and they're thinking about heaven and God and these elemental things. And as much as I'm kind of mixed on Frank Borzage as a director. I do find it interesting the way he, and also by extension just Hollywood, handled this kind of subject matter like this about like lower class people who are just, you know, trying to find their place in the world, and it's not really meant to entertain you with like a song and dance type of thing, or even with comedy. It's meant to actually reflect real life. And I just think that's interesting to look at how Hollywood was doing that in this early stage here, you know, writing with more of a realism to it.
Yeah, this is also just before, this is the pre-code era, so
Yeah.
all of these movies have elements to them that, beginning in, what was it, 1930-ish, you would not really see. There's a sexuality, there's even a level of violence that you would not really see. It just kind of stopped.
Right.
And so seeing these movies of the 20s gave us so much of, I guess, what we could have kept seeing. We probably wouldn't have had to wait till, you know, the 1970s to start seeing like real violence in movies and profanity and stuff like that. It probably would have started much earlier had it not been for the Hays Code era. So it's great. It's one of the reasons why I really, people need to watch these movies. If you love film and if it's something that you study, it's too important to miss this era. It's vital.
Yeah. And I think if you're very limited in your film knowledge in general, I think you could probably have a sense of classic Hollywood, that it's extremely sanitized and that doesn't really have anything to say compared to modern film. But there's so much here. There's also so much great, just like incisive commentary. There's a lot of movies here, and when I was doing the 1929 episode too, that are like questioning authority and our social systems. You know, these were topics that they were actually handling pretty well at that time, and that would sort of go away.
Yes, and between this and Sunrise, there's definitely the Madonna whore complex in full effect in both of those films. And definitely in this, because, you know, Janet Gaynor is the heroine and she is who we're rooting for. And it's in this case, there is very, very little, if no gray whatsoever between her and her sister. I mean, her sister is just vehemently horrible, and there is no sympathy to lay at her feet.
And I think the trick with silent films, as we probably know, is that it's hard to really communicate in terms of dialogue and just how people are really feeling, because it's just a limitation there. But I do think the film does a pretty good job, especially with Janet Gaynor, with Diane and her arc. I'm just thinking of certain little scenes, like when she's first in the bed of at Chico's apartment, and she's just like has so many emotions going across her face, and she's so nervous, and also sort of like checking him out when he has his shirt off.
I know. Thank you for mentioning that, because I was just about to.
Yeah, that's a fun scene. And yeah, how much more she just opens up as a person once she is in like more of a healthy relationship with him and is able to just kind of be her true self. Yes. I mean, I guess it's odd that I'm sort of framing all of that from Diane's point of view, considering I introduced the film as being like, hey, Chico, and he's meeting Diane and all that. But I really found the film a lot more interesting when it was about her and her arc rather than his, just because we've seen stories of this kind of just like the down and out guy before, and I don't know if there's much different or unique with that. But with her, I do think her arc is crafted pretty well. Yeah.
I mean, Kevin, that is the homosexual point of view.
Well,
You
okay.
know, our entryway is the actress and
Yes.
whatever her arc is. So I completely agree with you.
Okay. I figured you would, despite your feuding with Miss Gaynor, of course.
Yes, like I
Um,
said, I'm willing to put it aside for this conversation, but
wow.
immediately afterward, mm-mm. She's on
Great.
red.
Wow. All right. Noted. Uh, what do you think of just the relationship itself? Do you think they have good chemistry? Do you think they're cute together? Is it toxic? I mean, these are all things that we have to think about with classic movies because it's not always handled well.
Yeah, that's the other thing about doing these revisits is that we're obviously doing it from a lens of where we are now socially, where movies are now.
Right.
I don't actually think it's that toxic, all things considered. Yes, it's a guy saving a girl movie, but she has enough agency, and like you said, she has enough moments of self-realization and turning from feeling of no worth to being a person of value, whether it's in a relationship or to herself. And I think that is extraordinary. So I don't think it's really a toxic relationship. It takes its time in getting there, which is really interesting because a lot of short films or silent films have been much shorter,
Yeah.
and they're very expedient about their plot and their narrative. And this takes its time, and I appreciated that so much,
Yeah.
that the concept of her of their meet cute essentially, and the entire conceit, which you've seen through 100 years of male female romance relationships, where they aren't, they're just friends or acquaintances first, and then they kind of get to the romantic stage. This is, I mean, it's as old as time, and they take their time to get there, and that makes it all the more genuine and rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is like one of the great cinema
No,
romances by any means,
no, no,
but
no.
I do agree that just the time that the film takes to really sort of cement that the two of them should be together is something that is present in a lot of the great sort of romantic comedies and
Mhm.
dramas. So, yeah, I give it credit for really not rushing through that and really kind of earning that, I think. One of my
Yeah, I think
favorite things, which is kind of cheesy if you're talking about it out of context, but I love that they say heaven, and that's kind of often used in place of like I love you or any kind of like sentimental thing to say to each other. Like it's just this sort of mantra they have together, which is they say Chico, Diane, heaven.
Mm.
And at first it was like, well, that's a little clunky, but there's something kind of endearing about it after a while that I was won over by the end. I don't know
Yeah,
about you.
yeah, no, I was too. It's probably not my favorite of the three, but yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. There's also a really interesting, I mentioned this earlier, but with like talking about God, like a
Mm.
real question of faith here from very early on. We have Chico like questioning God, or as they say in the film over and over, bon Dieu, because it's in Paris. Um,
Yeah.
and like how he prayed and prayed, but God didn't take him out of the sewers. And then eventually he becomes, a believer, I suppose. Did you care for that little subplot there?
I don't think I necessarily cared or didn't care for it. I guess. Um,
Right.
I guess I don't have too much of an opinion on that, and I usually do with religious stuff, because I can be pretty antagonistic towards religious stuff in movies.
Sure. Sure.
But
Yeah.
I think, again, being that this is pre-code, it's not Um, it isn't preachy in any way, so it wasn't invading on
Yeah,
the story for me for Chico.
I would
And
agree.
it's again it's like any other version of a story of somebody who is in one position in life and would like to be in another, and they have to figure out, who is the person or the entity that's going to take them out and get them there. Is it themselves? Is it somebody else? Is it a higher power? Whatever it is. So I think what he realizes is that he can ask and pray to God, but the thing that was going to change for him was himself and her, and the act of rescuing her.
Yeah. And I agree that it's not really preachy, even though I was concerned that this would just be kind of like one of those religious redemption stories. I mean, the movie is called Seventh Heaven, so I don't know. It could have gone down a very different kind of path than it ended up doing. And yeah, by the end, I sort of understand why he would feel the way he does.
Mm-hmm.
The war stuff is a little. I think it's not as effective because the print is not great.
Yep.
So it's kind of blurry and indistinguishable sometimes exactly what's happening once he's off at war. Not as not as effective as Wings, for example, which also is in war. But that's hard to even really say, considering.
Yeah, that's too hard to make that comparison because it's just so. Yeah, Wings is
One has
something
been restored
incredible.
and one hasn't. So
Yeah, dramatically so.
yeah. And I do just want to talk about the ending here. So, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen this film yet, this 94-year-old movie. We'll be talking about the ending. If you don't care, keep listening. If you do care, go ahead and watch it. It's on YouTube for free. So, I did not realize this when I first watched it, but there are actually multiple interpretations of this ending. Where Diane receives the news that Chico has died in the war, and she's very upset, but also she doesn't really believe them that he really is dead, because they have this tradition where they talk to each other at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's like this spiritual
Yes.
thing. And she just knows in her heart that he is still alive. And then sure enough, he comes barreling down the street. Now he's blind, and he runs up the stairs, and they embrace, and then they're just like bathed in the glow of the sunlight as if heaven is shining down on them, and the end. So I'll say this first off, watching it initially, I did take this at face value. I mean, it's a realistic film. I assume this is just what happened, that they were wrong and that he really had survived somehow, and it was a nice happy ending because the studio wanted a happy ending. So first off, I'll just ask you what you thought of the ending itself before I go any further into this.
Um, I think it might be just a little bit hokey,
Yeah.
but then it does depend on how you choose to interpret it. There, you could look at it very literally, and I think if you do, then it does move into a little bit of over sentimental territory, which for the most part the movie hasn't really been in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another maybe more left field interpretation is that if you borrow the film's title a little bit too much, that you are looking at an afterlife almost, essentially. Which I think is a reasonable interpretation of it. I think it might actually be one that, despite everything we just said about religion and preachiness, might be a slightly less sentimental version of it, because it's not that sentimental of a film. And a lot of movies in this era were not, because the impact of studio just felt a little bit less. So there was more freedom to do things. There was freedom to allow, a major character or a lead character to die so that the audience and the other characters could feel the emotion of it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll just get into it now. There are some people who believe that this ending is imagined, that it is Diane, it is in Diane's head, basically, and she is kind of slipping into a kind of delusion of him running back into her arms again, which is the more cynical and kind of even sadder take on the ending. I could also see an interpretation where it's like, yes, she's imagined this, but it represents something more symbolic or, celestial, as you were suggesting, rather than it being like a Norma Desmond style delusion or something. And instead, it's sort of just representing like how he will always be with her, even if he's not physically there, like she'll always carry a little piece of him with her, basically. And I can understand this kind of interpretation in general because it is more realistic and it is more in keeping with the film that we just watched for an hour and 50 minutes. So, I mean, I don't know how often it is that like the military is wrong about one of their soldiers dying.
Sometimes,
Okay.
whole plots are in movies are hinged on that, just for dramatic value.
True.
But I think the one thing, and you mentioned it before, the 11 a.m. thing for the film, that is something that, regardless if they are both alive or one of them is dead, every day will have an 11 a.m. and that will be the moment that they think about the other person. So he could be dead, and she could be having this moment at 11 o'clock in the morning every day until she doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was a modern movie, would be 11 a.m. would be like the title of the movie, and it would be a rom-com.
Right. Instead, we do get this ending that I imagine that most audiences just took it at face value at the time, and maybe even still do now, of just the kind of classic melodramatic ending. I almost wonder if it is like there's something so much more heightened about it than it suggests before. Like I said, the first hour and 50 minutes, because tonally it really does feel out of place with the rest of the film. But yeah, I don't know. Another reason I bring this up is that I don't know if you know about the Damien Chazelle of it all.
The Babylon?
No.
You mean that he's got coming? What do you mean?
No. So Damien Chazelle said that the ending to Seventh Heaven actually influenced the ending of La La Land.
Oh.
Yeah. In the sense, and at first I was like, what are you talking about, Damien Chazelle? But once he explained it, I'm like, okay, I could maybe see that. In the sense of like giving people both types of endings, one that's real and one that's perhaps imagined. And I think in his view, the film is more in that interpretation that Diane is kind of maybe imagining that Chico came back to her, and we don't really get that snap back into reality like in La La Land, but it still offers both types of endings, because right before that we have the scene where she is like grieving because he's died. So that's interesting.
That it is. And I can absolutely see that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Well, and no wonder he wants to make a silent era movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense, and I had not read that. I don't know why, but I had not.
Yes, it's all connecting now. Yeah, so the film itself, it made Fox actually a hit studio. Like, it was very important in the success of Fox as a company. And it resulted in a kind of a spiritual sequel a year later, which was Street Angel, which reunites Frank Borzage and Janet Gaynor and Charles Farrell. So, yeah. Who said that, they weren't sort of pumping out the same types of movies even then? even in silent era, they were still like, we should do this, but like slightly different. Give the audience what they want, but like, maybe change the character names. Yeah. So.
Yes, that's the studio system. You just keep putting the same people together and they're like, here you go.
Yeah, this is what you want, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Until you don't.
So, any other stray observations on Seventh Heaven? Anything with other supporting performances outside of Gladys, of course?
No, she's really kind of the only one that really stands out, and she's even one of the few with a name. Everybody else is like sewer rat, and you're they don't even get.
And that's not even an exaggeration. That's true.
It's not. That's his credited character because he doesn't have a name, and I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want the wicked version of this, so that I want like Nana's story. I want the prequel version of this, and I want to know why Nana is such a vengeful, angry sister, and I mean, it could be pretty obvious, that Janet Gaynor was the favored one and growing up, and Gladys was like the ugly duckling, and it writes itself, but still
she was misunderstood. Gregory Maguire, get on this.
Exactly.
Yes.
There was so little else other than the uncle, but even then the uncle and that comes in, it's so brief, and that's where you have that, oh, is she a prostitute?
Right.
more than any moment, because it's like, I will not have any girl of this type in my house.
Exactly.
Like, what type are you talking about, uncle?
Yeah, we don't get a lot of character exploration outside of this central relationship, which is fine, but
I think that's why it allows that relationship to completely grow and be what it is, because there are no B stories in this.
Right. Yeah. But I think, we were talking earlier just on DM about just like silent films that are on the longer end, and how that's kind of like not, it can test your patience perhaps.
Yeah.
But this, I think, moves pretty well on the whole. I wouldn't really say that it is too long or too short.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if it was trimmed closer to like Sunrise, but
sure.
Then it's like I said, I just appreciated the time that was given to that relationship growing into something, instead of it being so quick.
All right. Well, you can watch Seventh Heaven, as I said, fully on YouTube as of right now. Tell me what you think. I'm curious, because I haven't really covered silent films yet, and this is the one and only time I'll be doing that. Mm-hmm. So I'll be curious to hear what more of my listeners think of this one. So when we come back, we will be discussing Seventh Heaven at these first Academy Awards and why it lost Best Picture to Wings. And we're back. So now we'll be discussing Seventh Heaven at the Oscars. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director of a Dramatic Picture for Frank Borzage, Best Actress for Janet Gaynor, one of 3 films that she was nominated for, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Art Direction. And it won the 3 big sort of fields that we like to talk about with Oscars: directing, acting, and writing. So not a bad haul for Seventh Heaven on this first Academy Awards. But of course, it does end up losing Best Picture to Wings, which is the more extravagant production. Eric, is it really kind of an open and shut case when it comes to like Wings being like this huge production and employing so many extras and innovating with these effects? And is this kind of like, well, obviously Wings was always going to win this?
I think so. I think it's hard not to.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about 1927 and 28 and what Wings does. I mean, the first airplane flight was like barely 25, not even 25 years before that. So the concept, when you put the things into a timeline like that, and then what they do with the amount of dogfights, and for a 2.5-hour movie, as much as I love Wings, a few less dogfights or shorter ones might have been a little bit better. But what they do is so extraordinary. And it's the kind of thing that, strangely enough, it just kind of kept going throughout the history of the Academy Awards, where these massive productions were able to dwarf smaller films. And so I feel like it was almost inevitable that it would have won. But the whole set of nominations are so weird and completely inconsistent. I don't get it. How does Wings pull off a Best Picture win and do it in such a huge, extraordinary way, and then like not get a directing nomination? That would never happen now.
Yeah, I do not understand how that happened at all.
It makes no sense.
And, you know, same with Sunrise on the unique and artistic picture side.
Yeah.
That's not nominated for directing either.
R.I.P. that category.
Yes. First and last.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I sort of think we should contextualize just the fact that this is the first Academy Awards and just talk about sort of the intentions behind it and what they were just trying to put across with awards to begin with. As people perhaps know, it's sort of founded by Louis B. Mayer, and it's to establish a kind of alliance between just the power players of the industry, essentially to negotiate with labor unions, and sort of provide sort of managing with that. And then the awards themselves actually come a few months later after they even established that. And it is to really provide some legitimacy to film as an art form. And I guess if you want to be cynical about it, it is kind of just like the film industry doing their best to create good PR for themselves, you know? But, you know, I think there were people at the time who had good intentions with what these awards could do, but I imagine there were also some executives who did just sort of see it as a way of just trying to legitimize their business. Because at the time there was this creeping sense of really like the Hays Code about to be put into place, of like concerned mothers and certain religious groups that were concerned about what was happening with film, and that was gaining more and more steam. So that's all part of why this is created. And also the voting is very interesting in these early years, where, you know, each member of the Academy only gets one nominating vote for their field, like that, just the one. And then it goes to this central board of judges, which is there's 5 people in them, one from each branch. and they basically winnow it down to 3 nominees, quote unquote, and then the 5 of them just pick a winner. So it's not even really like what we see now by any means. It's just
basically the New Mexico Film Critics.
Wow, that is a reference that 5 people will understand.
And they will all be listening to this, so that works.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's very different when we're talking about like, oh, will this widespread academy like this film over this film, when we're only talking about 5 people. So,
yes, and to your point, we love to wax poetic about the Oscars and how much we love it, but yeah, this was really started as a PR event for the exact reasons that you mentioned. You know, it turned movies into these elegant, extravagant events. I mean, premieres were kind of already like that, but the Oscars were like the amplified version of that, where it's what people wanted to see. But, you know, this is also well before television, and this wasn't even on the radio. It's the only one that was never broadcast in any way. But, you know, it would be in newspapers and stuff like that. But it was just the beginning of creating this indelible and undeniable thing, as all of these elements were looming over them, like you said, the Hays Code, and even talkies, how the whole industry was going to have to change. I mean, especially if you're talking about Louis B. Mayer, there's no altruism really in here whatsoever. I mean, he's a fucking monster. So you have to look at it within the scope and the bubble of that year and exactly what it was, and not romanticize it too much.
Yes. I feel like you've mentioned this on every episode you've been on, which is the idea that you have to look at them within the context of the year that they were in, and not really think about, like, it's not apples to apples here.
It's not the voting system, like you mentioned, which I think a lot of people will be really surprised to hear. Not the same at all. I think that's also why everything was so inconsistent. Why nothing lined up exactly how you thought that it would, and you get Ben Affleck if somebody thinks that somebody else is going to vote for something or whatever. It's crazy. I mean, when you really look at this lineup, it's totally bizarre. Poor George Barnes. Goodness, that guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned Louis B. Mayer there. Not a great guy. But I did take note of this one quote that he had from the actual first ceremony, which is, he says, this is his way of sort of putting more importance on the idea of these awards itself, which is, life without service isn't worth living. Give flowers to the living. Don't wait until they're dead.
Wow.
So that's why the Oscars are what they are, apparently.
And the honorary Oscar was born.
Exactly. So there you go. But as far as the wings of it all, I mentioned on the 1930 episode about All Quiet on the Western Front how that film was essentially like where things started when we think of Best Picture. Like, it's epic, and there's war, there's romance, it's very long, it's about an important message, and I stand by all of that in the sense of talkies because it's also impressive on a sound level. But here with Wings, I mean, this is the very first Best Picture winner. It also has a lot of those same things that I was talking about, which is the war and the romance. It has something for everyone, men and women. And comedy and this like tear-jerker of an ending.
1917 could never.
Wow. Well, we just talked about that.
I know.
So, good connection.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because I kept thinking about that honestly through so much of the movie, even though there
Hmm.
is the female component in Wings in a way that is not in 1917.
Right.
I kept thinking about that movie
Hmm.
over and over.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to paint too broad of a brush with silent films because, I've seen more than a few, but probably still not enough to make a big judgment call about like what they are as a whole, in my opinion, on them. But anyway, this is all to say 144 minutes of silent film is a lot. But
Yes, yes.
I do think, despite some of those aerial fights going on a little too long, that it does keep you engaged in a way, and that the aerial sequences are very advanced feeling for the time period.
Oh yeah.
And there's that one tracking shot that everyone knows from this movie
Yes.
that goes around Twitter every few months or so, like, wow, how did they do this? That's just zooming through a bunch of tables at a restaurant, and also there's like two women who are flirting, and everyone's like, oh
Thank
my
you for
god.
mentioning that.
Yes, yes, a nice little touch. And that's very impressive. Still, to me, it's incredible.
It's like probably my favorite, if not maybe second favorite scene in that movie,
Mm-hmm.
because Jack is so completely oblivious and not caring about this French woman that's trying to fuck him because all he cares about is bubbles. No war, just bubbles. I love that so much because I'm like, girl, I am with you
We haven't we all
completely.
been there? No
We
war,
have
just
all
bubbles.
we have all been there. No war, just
Yes.
bubbles.
Yeah. He loves bubbles. I think that's adorable.
Hmm. In so many ways, Jack
Yes.
Powell.
Yes.
Oh,
Do you want to talk about a little bit about the ending scene? Not the ending, but the sort of
yeah.
embrace that happens.
It's really funny because I've seen it many, many times, and it always pops up uh, in any type of retrospective when you're talking about LGBTQ movies, and the context of it is incredibly, incredibly important. But I got really emotional because in context, it's a beautiful and it's a gorgeous moment, but in the full 2.5 hours from the very, very beginning, when Clairbeau is trying to really get with Charles Rogers, and he's just
Hmm.
like, sure, whatever, great, I love my car. Look at myself in the mirror. He just doesn't care about her at all, and I'm like, girl, I'm with you. Um, and just kind of like Seventh Heaven, he goes to war and meets Richard Arlen, and they fight literally at first, and then
Hmm.
become super fast friends, and then completely inseparable, and they have their little back and forth that they always do. It's
Hmm.
okay, or okay, and what develops between them is what would be called bromance now, but it's my least favorite word, like in the world. Um, but it is such an intense and deep connection, um, that once you get to that ending where Jack is stroking David's hair as he's dying and kissing him on the mouth, and there is nobody around that's watching it that is judging it. There's no there's nothing, and it's just allowed to be such a beautiful moment, and it's uninterrupted. And this is 1927, and I know it means something different in 1927 than it does in 2021, but it's it's an incredibly emotional moment. So for a movie that has spent 2.5 hours with massive war action scenes and the dogfights, to be able to have that moment is more than enough reason for it to win.
Hmm.
It's extraordinary.
I agree. And it's very funny that we're really coming full circle here, where like we're tearing up over talking about two dudes kissing,
I
and
know.
we started with Brokeback Mountain, and here we are in 1927, and things haven't changed.
It
Yeah.
really, it's perfect that it's you and I doing this last one and talking about this movie
Hmm.
because of the first one with Brokeback, because you can draw direct lines to it.
That's true.
Because
Yeah.
after David dies, Jack has to go to his parents with, the 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 thing,
Hmm.
the motif that has
Hmm.
kept him going, and it's just like I don't know how you can't be moved by that.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an emotional story at the center that isn't just this like romantic situation with Clara Bow wanting to be with Charles Rogers, but the relationship between these two men is the emotional core of the film, and how that relationship evolves and how they just become closer. And in that beautiful, intimate moment, it's just like fully realized. And yeah, it is extremely emotional, and did not see that coming in the slightest, I must say. So I
Yeah,
love
that
that.
I do
Yeah.
too, and that's why I loved revisiting this, because it had been so long, and because the two takeaways of this movie have always been that tracking shot, and then that brief moment near the end, which is always kind of cut into like maybe about 10 seconds,
Hmm.
instead of the whole thing, which is actually quite long and just incredibly intimate.
Yeah.
Um, but it also really helped by, and we mentioned it briefly, the most impeccable restoration I think I've ever seen.
Truly. It's
It's stunning,
it really is. And the
and
difference in
it's
the colors, I think, is
oh,
beautifully done. Yeah.
oh yes, yeah, and it really helps, because Charles Rogers is probably the most beautiful man that's like ever been on film. I mean, he's like
Yes.
pretty. He's like scary pretty. And then Richard Arlen is very rugged, square jawed, and hyper masculine.
They're cute
So it's,
together.
but they're adorable together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Hmm.
But see, there's a movie that was not afraid to. I mean, even though the ending is what it is, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like The Sound of Music, where once they like leave the theater, I can stop the movie and I'm like, okay, cool, it's done.
Cool. Yeah, right.
And so like once David dies, I can end the movie. I would never need to watch the actual ending again.
Right. That is the emotional ending, truly.
It is.
Um yeah. So we kind of got off on a tangent there, but I do think that that emotional component with all of the technical craft, I mean, you look at that and it's just like so much more impressive than Seventh Heaven and The Racket. I mean, combined, it's just like there's no contest. So,
Let me ask you something, unless you're
oh,
gonna ask it, and I
yeah,
don't want to
go.
step on your foot. If there was no separation between outstanding picture and best unique and artistic picture, do you think the results would have been still Wings over Sunrise?
I think it would be the same with Wings winning because it is the more extravagant production. Uh, and Sunrise is kind of more sort of German expressionist, sort of European feeling compared to a very American Wings.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that would have made the difference. So, do you agree?
I think probably, yeah. Although I like Sunrise more than I liked Seventh Heaven,
Mm-hmm.
which also has that Madonna horror thing,
Yeah.
and really it's very A Place in the Sun, like
Yeah.
to a weirdly alarming degree.
Yeah.
But it also benefits from being able to be like a really sexy and super horny movie. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's lingerie and there's sexuality and there's infidelity, and it's like you would not have gotten to see that in a couple of years. So I think there's an element to that. I love the German expressionism actually of it,
Mm-hmm.
but
No,
I think
yeah.
to your point, I think there was a bit of protection maybe over uh, more American style stories, even though, I mean, Seventh Heaven takes place in Paris, and Wings doesn't take place in the United States either, and except for the beginning and the end. So I guess it's
Sure.
how you view what an American film is.
Right. Yeah. Well, we did get a few questions that I want to get to from Twitter. Uh, this is from Jeffrey Kerr. Given how much the Academy liked Wings enough to have awarded the film on both of its nominations, including Best Picture, how was William Wellman not nominated for Best Director? So we sort of touched on this a bit earlier. I do think it's just a discrepancy in terms of like the voting was whack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too, because
Just
if you combine the two picture categories and the two directing categories, there's only crossover of two films and directors. It's one.
Yeah.
One.
Well, Seventh Heaven and The Crowd.
Two. Yeah, two. Seventh Heaven and The Crowd.
Yeah. You were right the first time.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm looking directly at it. Which I still, other than the voting schematic explaining it, it's just so damn bizarre.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
like,
Wellman should have absolutely been here. He should have been.
Yeah, of course. And like a few years later, he would have been.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's just the weirdness with the voting. Really, that's all I can really say to it. And maybe it was personality based, and it was truly like political in the sense of like, we want to award these specific directors.
Yeah, there's also the Charles Chaplin nomination, but then he got an honorary Oscar, the first, for The Circus and for doing everything in it. So, I mean, you could have reasonably not nominated him for director, given him the honorary, and then, put somebody else in there.
Exactly. In retrospect, that would have been the right way to go. But
exactly.
Yeah, like 100 years later, we're saying this, but
make it right, Academy.
Yes, right. This is from Marcel. So, which of the two silent Best Picture winners do you like best, The Artist or Wings?
Oh my God, this isn't even close. It's Wings.
Yeah, it's Wings. I mean, The Artist is not a movie that I hate. It's just not a movie that I feel passionate about.
Mm-mm.
So,
and it doesn't have a gay kiss, so
exactly. Thank you. And it has Jean Dujardin, and it doesn't have a gay kiss.
Exactly.
How
robbing us.
Yes. All right. Well, I want to just briefly touch on the other Best Picture nominee from the Outstanding Picture lineup, which is The Racket. I don't know if it gets any other nominations? ? I don't think so, which is another oddity here. Yeah, it doesn't. But I feel like I've encountered a number of these kinds of gangster films from this era, like, Alibi, Five Star Final, The Front Page, all these kinds of, like, crime dramas that were all nominated for Best Picture. Some of them I like, others just come and go. This is more in the come and go pile.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is just a very, very simple, bare bones cop versus criminal story. I don't remember a lot that was particularly special about this one, and I only just watched it a few days ago. Like, it's all just kind of left my mind mostly. I do like the general sentiment of films from this era, like I mentioned earlier, of like society kind of being corrupt and owned by these crime bosses, and like you can't get elected without them, and then they're kind of outsmarting the cops. we're not really trusting our institutions. But then, of course, by the end, here comes the police captain, and the right and wrong is restored and all that lovely stuff.
Yeah.
But Louis Wolheim is in this. He gets the more juicy role of the crime boss. Also, one other thing I just want to mention that threw me off in the opening credits. It says in the titles, Helen Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, all right, here we go. Helen Hayes is going to be the female lead here. Then she never shows up. And I'm like, what's happening? And then there's a woman in the film who is the girlfriend of the crime boss's brother, and she is introduced as Helen Hayes.
Yeah.
So I
It's
guess
an old
just
switcheroo.
yeah, I guess my reading comprehension was off because I assumed that Helen Hayes would be in this film because it's in the credits, but it was actually an actress playing a character named Helen Hayes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I do wonder how Helen Hayes herself felt about this. I mean, she was in films at the time. Like, you know, seeing a character with exactly her name on it, this character who's thrown in jail. I mean, I don't know. So that's probably what I'll remember most about this film, which should probably tell you everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
the
Howard
racket.
Hughes too was the
Yes.
producer, so I'm sure that lent a little bit to its
Yeah.
nomination.
But, like, when I was going to figure out the runner-up of this particular lineup, it's between two movies. One of them doesn't have any other nominations. One of them wins for directing, acting, and writing.
Yeah.
It's... I mean, truly, thank God for, like, cases like this, that this was my last go-around here, that, like, this was, like, one of the easiest calls I've ever made in 3 years. So
Exactly. It's no Grand Hotel.
right, exactly. Anyway, so I don't really recommend it. Long story short. Let's move on to actually the unique and artistic picture winner, since you watched this as well, which is Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. Don't forget that.
It's such a weird, like, sort of subtitle.
Yes.
Why humans? Why not people? It's
Humans.
weird.
These
I
are
don't
human
get it.
beings, damn it, and this is their song. So
They're humans being.
yes. Wow. So deep.
I know.
Yes. Well, I'll just start off here by saying, for the last time I can say this on the main show here, I watched this film in my film studies class back in high school. Kudos to Mr. MacArthur for showing us this.
Nice.
And even then, I remember being really struck by how effective this was, even without sound, which is something I was not used to as a dumbass teenager. So, as people probably know, it's a very famous silent film at this point, but it is about a man who has a wife. They do not get names, so George O'Brien plays man, and Janet Gaynor plays wife.
Yep.
And he is drawn out of his home by a woman from the city. The character name is Woman from the City. And she seduces him and tries to get him to drown his wife. Yeah, so that she can, like, be with him in the city, I guess. And that does not end up happening. She freaks out, the wife, because she realizes what's happening. And then they reconnect and they spend time together out on the town. And then on their way back, they almost drown. And she goes missing, and the whole town goes out to find her. Sunrise. So that is the story. And it's almost like a parable in a way. And I think that just makes you appreciate the actual filmmaking behind it, which is just gorgeous. Like, every frame is almost a painting. Yeah. Big fan.
Yeah, I really like this too, and we mentioned a little bit before it has extreme Madonna horror complex.
Yes.
With the decision that he has to make. I love Murnau's use of superimposition of frames on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly effective. And again, one of those things where it's really important to watch movies like this to see the impact decades later in movies that people are more familiar with, and just have an understanding and a respect for that.
Absolutely. And this is also the second of the three films that Janet Gaynor won her Oscar for. I don't know if she has quite as much to... Yeah, she's just eating them all up. Imagine being Janet Gaynor at that first ceremony and being just like, I am that bitch. Like,
that is a direct quote, actually. She said that to me. Yeah.
She really had a high regard for herself.
Yeah, she no humility whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, she was only like 21, 22 at this time.
Suck it, Jennifer Lawrence.
Yes. Yes. Janet Gaynor, the original Jennifer Lawrence. Anyway, so like I said, I don't know if she has like as much to do here compared to Seventh Heaven. She's very kind of reactive on the whole. She is kind of just the wife. Shout out to Glenn Close. She was the original wife, truly.
The original.
The true example of what if there was a wife as a film concept. So, yeah, but again, perfect silent film star face, expressive eyes. And I do want to shout out Margaret Livingston here, who plays the woman from the city, who almost steals the film out from under them. I mean, like, more of a concept than like a real character, but she's like the epitome of like sin, and she's just like drawing out Adam and Eve to like tempt them, basically.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm a fan. So
we like the bad girls.
We do love those bad girls. Yes, queen work.
Exactly. Full circle.
Yes. But one of the first films also to use a sound effects soundtrack and this like synchronized musical score. So yeah, very well regarded at the time.
Yeah, and the tremendous sets on this too are out of control. I didn't realize it till I started, going back into a little bit more, because again, I mean, these are movies I haven't seen in a really long time, so I just had to bone up on a lot of details and information, and it's that a $200,000 set that it's phenomenal. No locations, which is really hard to think about when you're looking at like the downtown scenes and the cars and that roundabout, and it's just like, it's bananas.
Yes, and I love that scene of the two of them sort of arm in arm walking together, and it's like the background is changing.
Yes,
that's fun. They're like walking into traffic, but like they're so in love.
and they stop traffic. I love that. I love all the cars that stop right in front of them, and they're all angry because they're like just so into each other. It's like, come on, leave them alone.
They're in love, man.
They're
and
in
wife.
love, for damn sake.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, we got so many questions about Sunrise. Let's just get to them here. Eric Maxwell Bruns says, is Sunrise one of the greatest American films ever made, and why is the answer yes?
It's interesting, and we touched on this earlier, calling it an American film. It is an American film in terms of location, and this is F.W. Murnau's first quote-unquote American film. Right. But he's every bit and every element of his style is in this. There is still German expressionism everywhere. There's that weird scene at the very beginning. I took a picture of this too. I took a picture of my TV because I was just like, wait, what is going on? Where I'm going to pull it up really quick so I can look at it. They're at this kitchen table, and it is like a Dutch angle that Tom Hooper wouldn't even be able to avoid, because it was just so extreme. Like the table is like literally at a 45-degree angle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's fascinating. I love that. And there's all throughout the film are these moments that don't look a whole lot like other American films of that period. So it doesn't feel like an American film.
Yeah. And what about like the celestial kind of ghost looking woman of the city who's like consuming the man at a few points? Like there's this effect that is given that make her feel like a ghost.
Mm-hmm. I love
I
it.
mean, beautiful.
Yeah, it's that superimposition of her on
Right.
top of
Yeah,
him,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you don't see that. I mean, he was bringing his style to this film, and I love that. I love when a non-English language director directs their first American-ish film and they don't lose themselves in the process.
Exactly. But they are still able to translate their style in a way
Hmm.
that, American moviegoers can understand and appreciate. So
Yes.
he found a good balance there.
Hmm.
This is from Riley Gardner. I've never understood why people don't consider Sunrise and Wings as equal Best Picture winners. Why don't we? Yeah, Eric, why don't we?
Because they're in different categories, Riley. I'm sorry. I may have been there at the time, but I was not a member of the Academy, and it was not my choice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, strangely enough, I feel like the Academy nowadays is more in the interest of best unique and artistic picture, more so than outstanding production, if you know what I'm saying.
Which
Like,
now goes to director,
exactly.
essentially.
Outstanding production is the best director winner every year, essentially.
Yeah.
And the unique and artistic picture is like Moonlight, you know?
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
it's absolutely that. Absolutely.
but like, I think just for simplicity purposes, the Academy does that. And I guess, I mean, I think Sunrise is probably better as a film than Wings. It's more like I have less problems with it. It is tight, it's
Hmm.
like a tight 90.
Yep.
And it is so, I mean, it's literally unique and artistic. So it exemplifies what the category is.
Yes.
But
Completely.
but I think just on a production level, I think that is what traditionally has been regarded as Best Picture. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Anyway, I do agree that they should both sort of be honored in the same breath. It's tough because it's like this one singular year that this happened. It wasn't even a tradition of happening in later years, even in the second Academy Awards. So,
Yes. I
anyway,
mean, we can't rewrite history, but
yeah.
at the same time, you can barely talk about one without talking about the other.
Right.
So essentially, we already kind of do that.
Yeah. We just did.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just it's kind of what this is about. But yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is from Matthew Lucas. How do you feel about the fact that the Academy considers Wings the first Best Picture winner and not Sunrise? I get the Best Production / Most Artistic distinction, but they seem like equal honors, especially since this was the only year Sunrise's category appeared. See previous comments.
I was gonna say that's kind of the same, but
Yeah,
they shot themselves in the foot by naming the categories what they named them.
exactly.
So
So
again, we can't rewrite history. It is what
I
it
blame
is.
Louis B. Mayer.
I blame him for many, many things.
Yes. All right. Jackson DeStefano said, do you think the Academy should go back to splitting up picture or director, or do you think this short-lived idea was rightly ended? Yeah, so we didn't really cover that too much, but directing was split up into dramatic picture and comedy
Mhm,
picture for some
mhm.
reason. I think it's because there was just a lot of comedies that were released at that time, and they wanted to honor both. But what do you think? Should they split up picture and director?
N- no. No.
No. I mean,
Sorry,
this is
that's
like
no.
the discussion we were having a few years ago when the Academy was considering doing Best Popular Film,
Yeah.
and everyone's like,
Yeah.
"What are we doing?"
Exactly. God.
So,
Thank God that never happened. Ugh.
yeah. So,
Imagine for a moment if they had what that would look like this year.
yeah, I don't even
With
know.
no like big studio movies.
Congrats to Birds of Prey? Question mark.
Right? Bad Boys for Life.
Yes.
And
I shudder to think of what they would have done this year.
There's just one reason why doing that would be a bad idea.
Exactly. All right. Patrick Stokes said, "Can you explain Murnau not getting nominated for director? I know in the early years it was strongly an American award for the American industry, but Emil Jannings is winning actor, so that can't account for it."
Again, I was not a member of the Academy, so it was not my decision. I did my best. But I mean, this is the ongoing thread of this episode, is that the makeup of these nominations are truly bizarre, and the only thing you can really go back to is the voting system.
Right.
Whether it was a valid voting system or just shit got picked by 3 people.
Right. Yeah, it really it does go back to that. And I mean, I suppose, like, I understand comparing, like, Emil Jannings, he was a German actor, but it's like you were exactly saying, the voting system was different. I think, there's no consistency here. We can't look at it through the lens of, we're about to go to the 93rd Academy Awards and it's completely changed. So,
yes. And I mean, there were, non-American directors nominated. So it wasn't entirely just that it was a heavily Americanized 2 categories.
Right. Well, that's all our questions for that. I did want to get to the other 2 unique and artistic picture nominees because I did watch them.
Oh my goodness. You're such a completionist, yes. Kevin. I love that.
To a fault, really. I mean, in this case, some of these cases, it's like, to what end? to quote Maya Rudolph. To what end? So one of them is Chang, and the subtitle is A Drama of the Wilderness. So immediately, just from looking at the synopsis for this and the title, I'm already on guard. So it's classic Hollywood going into another country and depicting another culture, and that just typically doesn't go great. So I did end up watching this. It's kind of like a quasi-documentary about a farmer in Thailand who is trying to, like, ward off animals from stomping over his village, basically. Which, in the end, they do end up stomping all over the village, so mission failed, unfortunately. But there are a lot of title cards to, like, explain what's happening, even though we can sort of figure out what's happening just from watching it. We end up actually seeing some animals that are just straight up murdered on camera. So those of you who are sensitive to that, do not watch this. I also read that the filmmakers actually staged certain events in the film, which includes some of the killing of animals. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're interested in wildlife and you don't mind seeing things like that, maybe you'll get something out of this. I don't know. But, like, to see how the industry really was filming things like that back then, it might be interesting. But otherwise, I cannot find much to recommend here. It is certainly a unique film to be nominated for Best Picture, but I do not think that it is particularly artistic.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly a movie that would have just absolutely never be able to be made now.
Right.
If alone just for the animal deaths that are real.
Right.
I guess there's one positive element of it, and that is that white Americans aren't playing these characters.
There is that. That's true.
So props to that, because that certainly became something that was okay to do for the next 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think unless you're a completionist, probably not much of a reason to watch.
No. Plus, again, this is another one of those films where this is the only nomination for the film.
Yeah.
So, just a weird little outlier in Oscar history.
Yeah.
This is a fun little question from Kevin Clowder. Reportedly, the performer who received the most votes for Best Actor this year was Rin Tin Tin, who was then disqualified, allowing Emil Jannings to win. Do you think that if there were supporting categories, one of the apes from Chang could have been nominated?
Oh my God. That's not where I saw the question going.
I love my listeners.
Wow.
Their minds.
Well done, Kevin. How do you even answer that?
I'm going to go with no.
Yeah, I'm going to go with no as well.
But I appreciate the creative thinking.
I do too.
You do have to wonder if there were other animals from movie history that could have gotten nominations, like Uggy from The Artist.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only one I'm
Imagine all the posthumous nominations from Chang.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I should not have said that.
Yeah, it's true. That's like in memoriam, really.
It really is.
Well, that's depressing. But
yeah,
let's just move on and talk about The Crowd.
Okay.
So this one really threw me for a loop. I was not expecting to be as emotionally invested in this as I was. But this is basically about a man who is trying to achieve the American dream and then realizing how much of a lie that is, which is refreshing for 1927. You know, he meets a woman, they get married, and then he tries to advance in his career, but it doesn't really work out. They have kids, and there's a big tragedy that happens at one point. And even though there's a lot that's happening, it feels like kind of melodrama, if I were to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very naturalistic and grounded and surprisingly affecting. I mean, there's actually a title card here that I wrote down because it was just hit me in the gut when it was happening, where it says, "When John was 21, he became one of the 7 million that believed New York depends on them."
Wow.
And I was just like, wow, are we in The Graduate or something? What's happening? So yeah, it's about the American dream and just your place in the world and how the universe is kind of indifferent and the world just keeps going and you're not the center of the universe. Yeah, so the fact that this is a silent film actually, I think, helps it to feel even more poetic in a way. I think if it were a talkie, especially around this era, I think there would have been a lot of histrionic sort of yelling and loud and exaggerated. But here it's just all of this pain that the main character is going through. You just see it all on his face and in his body language. Yeah, so it's also nominated in director for King Vidor. And I have to say, if Sunrise weren't in that unique and artistic picture category, I would say The Crowd easily would have deserved to win this because it really feels very modern in its sort of in its subject matter and how it depicts that subject matter. So I would recommend this out of any of the outside of the three that we talked about the most.
Yeah, this is I regret not catching up with this because I can't say that I remember it from any of film classes or anything. And the more I hear you talk about it and then read about it, I really want to see it.
Yeah.
This is, again, because this is pre-code, it's allowing stories like this, of this kind of disillusion and almost not really anti-Americanism, but anti-American dream.
Yeah, like questioning it, really.
To exist,
right.
which just wasn't allowed to happen later. So it's fascinating, and it's King Vidor. So yeah, that alone should really be a reason to watch it. He has one of the most stunning and prolific careers through every major studio, through the studio system. So that's fascinating. And this was one of the first movies selected for the National Film Registry. It's got a really incredible bones to it. Goodness.
Mm-hmm. And Jean-Luc Godard, regardless of how people feel about him nowadays, but he has mentioned that he was asked like why more films weren't made about ordinary people like this is, and he said the crowd has already been made, so why remake it? So it is like that kind of an influential film for movies that on the whole I also tend to really respond to, which is like literally ordinary people itself, and Manchester by the Sea, things of that nature. So if you're a fan of those kinds of films, I think you would really like The Crowd. Well, this is from Jackson DeStefano, who said, if picture and director were each one category, which film do you think would have won, and which of all the nominees would you pick for each category?
Well, yeah, I think we touched on it briefly. If they were all put together, it would still be a weird category because you'd only have that crossover of two.
Right.
But my memory can't speak to enough of them to fairly answer, I don't think. Especially now that I really need to rewatch The Crowd or watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think Wings still would have won in general, but as far as what I would pick for each category, I think they got it right in both cases. So that's that for picture, but for director, I still think probably Frank Borzage would have won that if they were combined. I don't see Two Arabian Nights being a directing win overall. So I think nothing would have changed. In other words,
and the Academy liked him, and he won just a few years later too.
Yep,
against King Vidor again.
But actually, for my own little ballot, if I were one of the 5 central board of judges or whatever, I probably would have gone with King Vidor in director.
Cool.
Yeah, because I'm different,
Because I'm that bitch.
Yes.
And then he would have actually won and not had to wait till the honorary Oscar in 1979.
Exactly. You're welcome.
Yes.
So
see, be thankful.
We're rewriting so many Oscar wrongs here.
That's what it's all about.
Yep. Well, let us just get to our should have been a contender segment for the last time. These are other films that were not nominated for Best Picture that we just wanted to talk about. Eric, you said straight up front you don't have any to talk about.
Sorry, I don't.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I don't feel particularly passionate about other films as much here, but the only one I did want to really highlight is The Circus, which is the Charlie Chaplin film, and he is nominated for acting, directing, and also, I believe, writing? Question mark?
Question mark?
Yes. For original story, he is nominated. So there you go. But this is where he plays a guy who kind of just unwittingly becomes this huge act in the circus, and he's hoping to get with one of the women. And he's shy because he's always shy in these films at this time. Lots of great slapstick comedy with animals, which I imagine was a challenge to kind of wrangle all that together. But there's like a big tightrope act scene that involves a bunch of monkeys, and they are very unpredictable, and that's just fun. There's like a mirror gag, just really great classic Chaplin stuff, and like I said, really the first real multi-hyphenate to get into multiple categories here.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking
but
at the list that you sent me of all of
mhm.
the eligible releases from that year, and it's kind of fascinating. Adam and Evil,
Ooh.
another Les Mis, the first Les Mis. So, I mean,
This story just keeps getting told. Never
it
gets old, right?
is
Yeah.
a tale as old as time.
Hmm. We got this question from Jackson DeStefano again. Lots of questions, Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Chaplin's The Circus was removed from consideration and instead given Chaplin an honorary Oscar,
Yeah.
reportedly originally getting nominations in Best Actor, Best Director Comedy, and Best Original Story. What categories would you give it noms and wins in? Okay. Well, I definitely would give it directing. That's for sure. Over
Yeah.
Louis Milestone for Two Arabian Nights. That I feel good with. Acting, maybe not. But maybe story. I don't know. It's not like the most original story, so I wouldn't do that. So I think directing is great because he's really in command of his particular vision there.
What you said.
Okay. If there was going to be one and only one winner for best comedy directing, shouldn't that be Chaplin? I would say so.
I mean, you would think so, because since this is the first Oscars, and he made like 10 movies a year for a full decade before that. I mean, it's kind of why he got the honorary, because of that. But I think they could have, I don't know. Like I said, either it should have kind of either been all or nothing,
Right.
either eligible everywhere and nominated everywhere, or the honorary.
I agree. Yeah.
No double dipping.
They're trying to have it both ways, and I don't like that.
Yep, I don't
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. We got a question from Joe Gouveia who said, "What are your thoughts on the short-lived comedy director category?" I think I understand it for the time period, considering like I read context into why this was also here, and it's because there were just so many comedies that were released in this time that they wanted to just have an honor for them in one category. So I get it. I don't think it really needed to go on much further, to be honest, because it really is like, I don't know, it would be weird to just keep continuing with that tradition of like comedy directing, especially because nowadays it's just been so bastardized by like how we see the Golden Globe placements that who knows what we would have seen now.
Yeah. Well, it's also just strange to have that separation in that category between dramatic and comedy, yet the best picture categories aren't broken that way.
Yeah, it's very inconsistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's the first. They are figuring it out.
Yeah. I did watch Two Arabian Nights because I was curious to see if it really would if it deserved that distinction of being the only comedy directing win. It's not great. I mean, this is another film that's set in World War One, and it's like about these two soldiers who are captured by the Germans, and they end up escaping by dressing up as Arabian men. And this probably goes without saying, but they are white. With a concept like that, plus the fact that it's like classified as a comedy, it did have me once again a bit on edge, but I guess it's less offensive than I expected, although there is Mary Astor who is straight up playing an Arabian woman, and I'm just like, I see you, Mary Astor. But I don't know. It's like a dumb little buddy comedy. It's not really like great art by any means. It's just strange to have it as like an achievement of directing. Yeah.
Yeah, so. It certainly seems so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if for a year that does have so many comedies.
Yes.
That they felt needed to create a comedy category and then go for that.
I don't want it to come back. There would be no need. But
no.
I also just want to get to the other acting wins. I want to get to the third Janet Gaynor Best Actress winning film. She's just everywhere here.
I'm telling you.
As I was saying, this is sort of like a spiritual sequel to Seventh Heaven, even though it's like not the same characters, but it's just the same people again. And it's like a similar situation where Janet Gaynor and Charles Farrell, they're like working class people and they fall in love. But this one really felt very long to me. It's very drawn out and melodramatic. It's like in concept, it's interesting. Like it's about this woman who is basically forced into prostitution. Here we go again. To
Gosh
actually,
darn it.
yeah. But it's to pay for her mother's health care this time, which is like a noble cause, I guess. But I don't know. It's like these stories you see now from these like local news channels that's just like heartwarming. A local woman selflessly does this, that, and the other thing to help pay for her mother's transplant or something. And everyone's
exactly. It's like a
this
GoFundMe.
Is not heartwarming.
It's not heartwarming. It's disgusting. It's horrible. Shouldn't happen.
This is an indictment of our healthcare system that this is happening. But
exactly.
Anyway, it's fine. Janet Gaynor is at least given a little more to do. She's like more of an active person in the movie, so that's great. But I did find myself kind of zoning out through a lot of this, so I can't recall that much from it. But we did get a question from Juan Carlos Zoano, who said, which of the three Janet Gaynor performances do you prefer the most? And would you give her the Oscar if she could only win for one film? Well, I don't know if you've seen Street Angel, but between those two of Seventh Heaven and Sunrise, do you have a one she was better in?
Despite, again, I hate to beat this dead horse, it's another Madonna horror, and this time it's the same person and not two different people. I mean, that's like the thread of all three of these movies for her, of all of them.
Yeah.
Yet they do give her enough range for this to happen, although it's still so weird that she has three that she gets to win for. But whatever.
Yeah.
My
answer is very easy. Mine is very clear.
I think Seventh Heaven.
Yeah. It's Seventh Heaven. Easily the best for me. She gets the most to do. She has the range. She has the moment.
She gets to beat the shit out of her sister, so I'm totally down for that.
And I'm like, yeah, you go, Janet Gaynor.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one.
It's the one.
That is the one. And I think even if she just had this, it would have been a deserved win. So, but
Suck it, Gloria Swanson.
Yeah. But I am sad that she never won. But anyway, I didn't actually watch Sadie Thompson, so I can't say that like she was robbed or anything. But this is a really fun question that I'm sure you'll enjoy. This is from Glenda Miss Jackson If You Nasty.
Oh my God.
Is there a year... Pull it together. Okay. Is there a year where you'd give a performer a joint Oscar for all of their performances for the year, like the acting wins this year?
Oh my God. The NBR of it all.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I mentioned that earlier, that I think it would be kind of neat to be able to do that, because
right. So now let's play that out.
I'm very against the Academy's rule that an actor can't be nominated more than once in a single category. I think it's awful.
Yep.
I think there are a lot of really fun examples. This is just the one that kind of popped into my head first. It's not like this is the one. But I think I might pick Jessica Chastain.
2011. Yep.
Yeah. I think that's what I would pick. It was her breakthrough, obviously. She had extremely diverse roles. I mean, that 2011 is an absolutely absurd year for her. And if there was
Yeah.
like five movies or something,
Hmm.
it's the kind of thing where in 1927, this is exactly the person that would have won.
That's a good choice. Yeah. Just as a reminder for people, she had things like The Tree of Life and The Help and Take
Yes,
Shelter. Like, I don't know.
Coriolanus.
Yeah. What was happening with Jessica Chastain this year where it all converged?
It was a
Yeah.
lot.
It was a lot. She was like, I am here and I am here to stay. So, yeah. But one of the ones that came to mind for me is actually Julianne Moore in 2002
Mm.
for Far From Heaven and The Hours, which are they're similar in like the types of movies they are, where she's playing women from the 1950s. But I think she's phenomenal in both of those movies, personally.
Well, because she is, and we're keeping it
Yes.
redhead here, so
We love our redheads. Yeah.
hmm that's obviously a perfect pick. It's unimpeachable.
Yeah. Thank you. And then she would have won lead for that in my view, because she is a co-lead in The Hours, of course, as we all
Yep.
know. But like, I imagine even maybe last year we would have had Laura Dern winning for Marriage Story and Little Women. I don't know.
hmm
I'm not saying that would be deserved, but like that could have happened.
I love it. I think it's great. Although, when you look at the winners from this year, the two people that had multiple films noted are the ones that won. Uh,
Right.
so that is an advantage that someone that, say, maybe
Very
only
much
did
so.
one film,
Yeah.
would not have.
Right.
So it's not super fair, which
Hmm.
is why I think you should be allowed multiple nominations in a single category. That I want to see. I want to
Yeah.
see somebody get that.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine Kate Winslet would have gotten that in 2008.
I think so.
Yeah. And maybe
Gross,
like
but yeah,
it would have happened. It would have
yeah,
happened.
it would have
But
happened.
Leonardo DiCaprio, maybe in 2006, perhaps it could have happened. Blood Diamond
Yes,
and The Departed. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I'm literally looking right now at New York Film Critics Circle supporting actress because they do a lot of ties
Oh my God,
of
yes.
like multiple films. Like Miranda Richardson in 1992 won for The
Yes,
Crying Game, Damage, and Enchanted April.
yes.
She
And
was
she
the
won.
moment.
She won awards for all of those movies leading up to it, which is so fantastic.
Yeah. So there you go. Let's see if there's any other fun ones. How about this?
Well,
Way back. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just by virtue of screen time and everything, this would probably be a lot more common in supporting
Right,
categories.
exactly. Yeah. How about Marion Cotillard 2014, The Immigrant, and 2 Days, One Night?
I, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That seemed a little shady, but I guess we'll just move on.
No, it was. It was not. I
It was like,
swear.
okay. um, Way back in 1954, let's do Grace Kelly for The Country Girl, Dial M for Murder, and Rear Window.
Okay.
And the only other one I see here for actress is Ingrid Bergman for The Bells of St. Mary's and Spellbound. I don't know about that, but okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Found one more. Leave Ullman for Cries and Whispers and The Emigrants.
Okay. Yes to that.
Yes. So
Yes to that.
anyway,
That's-
I only
that's
looked
a
at
big-
the female categories because that's what I care
No, I'm
about.
shocked. Oh, but speaking
Whatever.
of
Hmm.
Jennifer Jason Leigh, 1990, Last Exit to Brooklyn, Miami Blues. Although one is lead and
Yes.
one is supporting,
Hmm.
I don't care because she should have been nominated and won for Last Exit to Brooklyn.
Go off. Yes.
Mm.
Women deserve to be nominated for multiple films. That's just a
Saoirse
rule.
Roman, Saoirse Roman, women.gif.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. I just feel like women. That's us right now.
That's it. Period.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just briefly want to touch on a man real quick. That came out wrong.
Did it though?
Maybe not. The Last Command, I just want to mention as our first Best Actor winner, Emil Jannings. I watched this. I kind of liked this. It's very meta because it's sort of about Hollywood, and it's Hollywood about Hollywood, which is fun. But it's about a former Russian general who Emil Jannings plays, who now ends up as a Hollywood extra, which is like, how does that happen? And it's a fun journey. And Emil Jannings is a German actor. He didn't know English very well, and this was basically like the end of the road because the talkies were coming around the pike. And he's like, I do not want any part of this. I am returning to Germany. Which, unfortunately, I did read that he was involved in numerous Nazi propaganda films and was a Nazi sympathizer.
Awkward.
So that is our first Best Actor winner, ladies and gentlemen. And he was just basically excommunicated from Hollywood after the fall of Hitler. So,
well, maybe he can make movies with Gina Carano now.
Hey-o. Topical. But there is something fun with this movie in the fact that it is kind of meta, and this is something that our friend Cody Derricks, shout out to Cody, had mentioned on his Letterboxd review for this. I just want to shout him out there because he makes a very good point where this is Hollywood already being self-aware in its storytelling and just depicting itself, and there's a level of cynicism with how it's depicting Hollywood that is very fascinating from this time period, and it's something that we would just sort of continue to see in certain forms with things like Sunset Boulevard and things of that nature. But here it is, even in the sort of beginnings of Hollywood in many ways, we have Hollywood being like commenting on itself. So that's kind of fun.
It's kind of wild considering how really early in the existence of Hollywood as a machine and as a thing in filmmaking that they're already like ready to comment on it.
Yeah. Joe Gouveia said, which do you think should have been the sole film to represent Jannings' win, The Way of All Flesh or The Last Command? Well, The Way of All Flesh is a lost film, so I have no idea what that is like. So by default, it is The Last Command. I think there's only like a few minutes that have survived from The Way of All Flesh, unfortunately, but it's always sad when this happens with like actual Oscar winners that are just lost to time.
Wow, the Wikipedia for it doesn't even have a time. It's 9 reels and 8,486 feet. Yikes.
Precisely. Matthew Lucas said, how did a major hit like Underworld get completely shut out, especially considering that Best Actor went to Jannings for another but less popular Joseph von Sternberg picture? Not to be like fact checker here, Matthew, but it did actually win Best Original Story, so it was not completely shut out.
There you go.
Period.
Period. Dot. Period.
Yes.
Oh yes. And again, just look at the lack of crossover in all of these nominations.
Right.
Seventh Heaven, the only one in the writing categories to cross over into picture director. It just is what it is.
They were just a mess.
They were.
Yeesh. Well, do you have any other thoughts on the first Academy Awards before we move on to our final segment?
For all that it is in its weirdness and lack of consistency, I'm glad they exist because we would not be here today talking without it.
Exactly. This was the start. One other thing that I failed to mention with the unique and artistic picture thing is that the executive board was going to give it to the crowd, but Louis B. Mayer basically vetoed that and wanted them to give it to Sunrise because basically the crowd was too depressing.
See, one person decided these.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
But I just find that funny because like we look back on these early years and we're like, oh, these were the hallowed first Oscar winners, and we have like a special place in our hearts for these early Best Picture winners. But then like you have one asshole executive basically vetoing all of the votes and being like, we should just give it to Sunrise. And that's what happened.
His quote, his comment on creating the awards is so... I mean, one thing I will give Mayer is how nakedly he expressed intention. And so...
Right.
True.
Like,
I found that the best way to handle filmmakers was to hang medals all over them. If I got them cups and awards, they'd kill them to produce what I wanted. That's why the Academy Awards was created. Damn.
Period.
There you go. It was to corral and control filmmakers and keep them in the system and do and make the movies that he wanted to make. Sorry to burst a bubble, Oscar fans.
Wow. You just broke me.
I know.
You finally did it.
Dreams are ruined, but I'm glad we waited till the last one to really break you in two.
Yes. Well, there you have it. I think that's a great note to end on as we move on to our final segment. When we come back, here we go. This is the final one here. We will be delivering our verdict as to whether we think Wings deserved Best Picture or if it should have been Seventh Heaven. And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think Wings deserved Best Picture or if it should have been Seventh Heaven. Erik Anderson, what is your verdict?
Well, you can call me a basic gay, but I am going with Wings.
Yes. And why is that?
I can't. It's not even necessarily for the elaborate production. Like I said, at 2.5 hours, they definitely could have trimmed some of those dogfights. As great as they were and realistic as they were, and the blood from getting shot, that was you couldn't see that later. It was I love the raw and the reality of it, because later in movies, you'd get shot and you would just like clench your chest, but you couldn't show blood. Right. And in this, they're spurting it out their mouth and just cover. It's just wild. But I like Seventh Heaven a lot. I like Sunrise a lot. But I do think that Wings takes me on the emotional and visceral journey that I want to go on when I'm watching something, whether it's a very intimate, two-hander of a movie, or whether it's a really humongous production. And the thing that's missing from so many huge productions is that intimacy, and Wings has everything. So,
Yes. I couldn't have said it better myself. I do agree. Wings was the proper first Best Picture winner. I mean, would I want to watch Sunrise more? Perhaps if we were to combine the categories and say like one whole thing here, maybe. But I think Wings just delivers on so many of the things that it's setting out to do, and really does provide something for everybody. And there's so many different things you can focus on that are great about it, from the cinematography to the beautiful aerial shots that hadn't been done before. And that very unique male relationship at the center of the film that is expressed with that level of intimacy at the end makes it a very special film, I think, and a unique and artistic one. Even if it does have a big budget, it is still unique and artistic of its own. So
yeah, and there's a lot of comedy and a cameo by Gary Cooper.
Yeah, that's all true. There's a lot going on. Yeah. So good. Well, I think we agree on that. That's nice to see. And here we are. We did it.
It's
I did
here.
It. We did it.
You did it. You did it, Kevin. Here it is. And I'll just echo what I said at the beginning. This is something that has meant so much to so many people. So I'm just so thankful that you have created this and have so many people that you have made fans, and even people that liked the Oscars and talked about it, in our groups and bubbles or whatever. This really expanded their knowledge base in like a film school level way, and I don't think you can do that as well in an academic environment as you can in an environment of passionate conversation. So I am so thankful for you.
Well, I'm very thankful for you, Eric, as well as I don't even know how many people that I've had on this show in 3 years. I lost count many months ago. But I have a lot of things to say here at the end here, so bear with me. So first off, as I've done with previous years, I now turn to you in the audience to vote for your favorite episodes of And the Runner-Up Is from the past year. I waited until now to open up the voting because this is the proper end of this Best Picture era of And the Runner-Up Is, where we only have a handful of episodes at the beginning of 2021, and I wanted to really just mark a proper end. And it is strangely appropriate considering the Oscars extended their own eligibility period to February this year. So I'm basically doing the same. So you can now vote for your favorite episodes of 2020 and also early 2021, starting with the High Noon episode featuring Tom O'Brien all the way through Seventh Heaven with Mr. Erik Anderson. And voting for that will end on February 26th. I will provide a link in the show notes for this episode, and I will reveal the results of that in a few weeks. At that point, I will be releasing a big Q&A wrap-up episode where I will make some more broad observations on this big experiment of mine. You can send in questions. Go to Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, and you'll see a little prompt for that around like the February 26th area, I imagine. So save your questions, ask some good ones. Anything you want to know about my opinions on the Oscars, the whole process of watching all these movies, the podcast itself, and just like my whole process of recording. Anything you want to know, just be creative. So, this is really it. Eric, there are a few guests that I have had on the show that I feel as honored to have as my final guest as you, because you were a big part of launching the show into a new level of awareness with that Brokeback Mountain episode. And I think it really reached more people, and your championing of the show has truly meant a lot to me. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as I said, I also want to thank every single person who agreed to do this show. There are truly, truly so many that I can't name all of them here, but just know that I appreciate you. You know who you are. And this is one of those podcasts where I asked most of my guests, like more than most podcasts, I asked them to go above and beyond to really deliver the best episode possible by watching a lot of movies. And it means a lot to me that so many people did that. And just after doing this huge deep dive into film and this Oscar history, I do feel so much more informed about not only the Oscars, but just the whole art of film itself and the value of awards, but also how they don't matter as much as the art themselves. And, you know, as much as I feel more informed, I don't consider myself to be like an extraordinary person or a big time film critic. And I think there are so many of my guests that really did elevate the show and made it what it was, including yourself, Eric. And I'm just happy to have had any kind of involvement in just really elevating those voices and giving a platform. It's just been one of the great side benefits of getting to have these like 90-minute to 2-hour conversations, sometimes well over 2 hours, and just getting to geek out with all of you and really just becoming friends. So, I mean, this is really turning into a monologue. Wow.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, for a long time, I just felt kind of alone in my passion for things like this, which is why doing this show has been so fulfilling for me. And it's just nice to know that there are others out there who are as passionate, if not more passionate, than I am about just nerdy stuff like this. And yes, so this is not the end of the show. This is not goodbye. I will come back with a different version of the show. You will also hear some of my coverage of the current Oscar race. So maybe in a month or two, I'll be back with that. I'm going to just continue with Patreon as well with the bonus episodes. But this is really the last regular episode of this main show for a while. And I don't know when I will return with a new format. I have a lot of ideas percolating here, but for now, I have to move on and do other things. But I will see you down the road, as they say in Nomadland. I will be back, and I am looking forward to answering your questions in a few weeks. Thank you all for going on this crazy journey with me. It's been wild. And I just wanted to end with this, which is a quote from Frances Marion, who was a screenwriter for MGM. She won a few Oscars. We talked about her work on the episode of about The Big House a few weeks back. And so around the time of the first Academy Awards, she wrote something very fitting about the awards themselves and what they represent. And here's what she said. She said, "The little gold-washed statuette was thought by skeptics and art lovers a bit on the amateurish side. Still, I saw it as a perfect symbol of the picture business. A powerful, athletic body clutching a gleaming sword with half of its head, that part which held its brains, completely sliced off." And I truly cannot think of a more perfect summation than that, considering this 92 episode journey that I have been on. So Thank you again, Erik.
Thank you, Kevin. I love you. I adore you.
And I will bid you all adieu.